challenges in the Indo-Pacific region shows a lack of coherence that we can only note and regret. Trust the Europeans to flaunt entitlement. France believes it automatically qualifies for all Indo-Pacific alliances. But why? Their president wants to trade with China. In February, he said the EU should not gang up on Beijing. That's what Macron said. Don't gang up on Beijing. So what's the problem now? Why does Macron suddenly feel left out? There's obviously money involved and prestige. This double cross comes at the wrong time for the French president. Angela Merkel is retiring. That makes Macron, Europe's natural leader, getting dumped in public will not help his stature. The bottom line is this: the Indo-Pacific needs enthusiastic partners, not half-hearted European have-beens, which is why Britain finds itself on this table. Boris Johnson has been leading a pivot in British policy. He sent a carrier strike group to the South China Sea. Compare that with what the EU did. A German warship, Bayern, is also in the South China Sea. But they did not want to hurt China's feelings. So the ship tried to make a courtesy stop in Shanghai. Do you know what happened? What the Chinese did? They denied permission. They openly snubbed the Germans. This kind of hesitancy will not help in the Indo-Pacific. This is not just, and it's not just Europe. New Zealand too is second-guessing this campaign.
Well, certainly they couldn't come into our internal waters. Our legislation means that nothing that is wholly or fully powered, no vessel that is wholly or fully, partially or fully powered by nuclear energy is able to enter into our internal waters. So that is in fact a position that has been held across parties for a long period of time.
So the AUKUS hasn't just rattled China, it has rattled US allies as well, at least some of them. How much of this is bluster and how much of it is serious? For starters, this is not the first Indo-Pacific alliance. We have the Five Eyes, we have the Quad, we have the UNZUS. How is this one different? You see, the AUKUS focuses on military capabilities. The other alliances don't, or they don't spell it out. The Five Eyes, for one, is about intelligence sharing. The Quad is still talking about trade and climate change. And the UNZUS is too narrow. The Indo-Pacific needed a forceful military alliance, and this could be the one. And I'll tell you why. The Americans are heavily invested in it. They don't normally share nuclear reactor technology. They've only done it once, way back in 1958 with Britain. And right now, Joe Biden desperately needs a win. So he's putting a lot of political capital into AUKUS. Plus, the submarines are just the start. America plans to arm Australia with Tomahawk cruise missiles and long-range anti-ship missiles. This alliance will bulk up Australian defense. There is no pretense of competition with China anymore. This is direct confrontation. Like they say in poker, all in. Where does that leave India and the Quad? Joe Biden did reassure his Indo-Pacific allies. But is the region becoming too crowded now? Too many alliances, too many objectives? The good news for India, though, is the level of commitment. America, Britain, Australia, they're all key allies of New Delhi. All three are on the same page against China. India won't have to convince these countries. They clearly are on board. But what about Quad? Is America moving on from Japan and India? Early days, it doesn't seem like it. Quad was never really a military alliance. They never said it. It focused on global commons, as they put it, trade, climate change, and recently COVID-19. AUKUS gives Quad some breathing room. There is no pressure now to become the Asian NATO or to build a fleet against China. AUKUS is doing just that. Instead, the Quad can dismantle China's economic dominance through new supply chains and trade deals. Basically, the Quad and AUKUS can complement each other. In that sense, New Delhi will welcome this alliance. But there's a hidden message there. India must take note of what happened to France and Europe. The alliance of democracies needs active partners, not hesitancy. Now is not the time for second guessing. Because the South China Sea is not the only problem that China is creating. Almost every day now, China is threatening Taiwan. The PLA is invading the Taiwanese airspace. Taiwan has now decided to spend almost $9 billion more to defend itself. Military upgrades. And even that might not be enough to contain the military tensions in the region.
Is China planning to invade Taiwan? Earlier this month, China sent nuclear bombers into Taiwan's airspace. The move sent alarm bells ringing in Taipei. Taiwan now says it is facing severe threats from China. It wants to spend close to $9 billion on military upgrades. The money will be used to buy new missiles and weapons over 5 years. These upgrades are no longer optional. The Chinese are breathing down Taiwan's neck. Taiwan's defense ministry recently released a dire assessment. It said China's armed forces can paralyze Taiwan's defenses. The PLA can fully monitor Taiwanese deployments. It can conduct crippling cyber attacks that will disarm air defenses, the command of the sea, and counterattack systems. These capabilities make the possibility of an invasion look real. For Taiwan, the challenge is existential. They have a modern force, no real match for the PLA. It's a David versus Goliath scenario. Taiwan is preparing for the worst. They are conducting their annual military drills. Taiwan's forces simulated various conflict scenarios involving the Chinese military, like biological and electronic attacks and a full-scale military invasion. Taiwanese jets rehearsed how to land their planes on highways if the Chinese military decides to blow up their air bases. Taiwan is standing up to the Chinese threat. But its moves have provoked an unlikely critic, North Korea. Its state mouthpiece has published a piece. It slams the United States for backing Taiwan and stirring up trouble for China. This comes as Pyongyang itself is intensifying missile tests. North Korea has conducted its second test in a week. It launched a missile from a train. The missile flew for 800 kilometers before hitting a target within North Korea. First, China's aggressive moves against Taiwan. Now, North Korea's missile launches. The growing military provocations are making the Asia-Pacific a more dangerous place. Bureau Report Beyond, World is One.
A bit of trivia now. See if you can guess this individual. He's regularly on the news nowadays. I will give you 3 hints about him. He is a quote-unquote charismatic military leader and a deeply pious figure. That's clue number 1. Clue number 2, and I'm quoting again, he stands as the fulcrum for the future of Afghanistan. Clue number 3, he is a quiet, secretive man who rarely gives public statements or interviews. Any ideas? Get ready to be surprised and disgusted. Our John Doe is Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar, aka Baradar the Butcher. This is how the Time magazine describes him, charismatic and deeply pious. They have put him on their list of 100 most influential people. Mullah Baradar is a Time 100 alumnus now. Who else is on this list? Simon Biles, the young athlete who stood up against sexual predators. Alexei Navalny, the Russian political campaigner who is still in jail. Katalin Kariko, the biochemist who unlocked mRNA vaccines. Mohammed and Muna Il-Kurd, Palestinian activists. These are some of the people on the list, and then you have Mullah Baradar. What is his claim to fame? Co-founder of the Taliban, deputy prime minister of an unrecognized regime, sanctioned by the United Nations Security Council. But Baradar is not influential. He is notorious. And the Time magazine should know the difference. They have divided this list into 6 categories. Baradar appears in the list of leaders. Apparently that's what we are calling terrorists nowadays. It's honestly jarring to read. You have Joe Biden on this list, Narendra Modi, Kamala Harris, Naftali Bennett, all elected leaders. Mullah Baradar does not deserve a place on it. So what is the Times defense? Well, they don't have one, because they believe they're right. Here's what the Times editor-in-chief wrote. I find reason for optimism, as I hope you will, in our 18th annual Time 100 list of the world's most influential people. It features extraordinary leaders from around the world working to build a better future, from entertainers striving to make Hollywood more inclusive to activists fighting for sustainability and human rights. How is Mullah Baradar building a better future? How is he fighting for sustainability and human rights of all things? He is not. Baradar held senior positions in the first Taliban regime. He was an accomplice to gross human rights violations. He supported and guarded terrorists, yet he is influential. How does the Time magazine measure influence? Here's what their former managing editor said back in 2007. Influence is less about hard power or force than the soft power of ideas and example. Yes, there are presidents and dictators who can change the world through fiat, but we're more interested in innovators. That was 2007. Frankly, much simpler times. Back then, terrorists were on the run, not lionized in Western magazines. What kind of message does this send to readers, especially younger readers? They see scientists, they see athletes, politicians, and all of a sudden, Baradar pops up. It's simply irresponsible journalism. Unfortunately, it is also the Times brand of journalism. They have a habit of chasing power, and it doesn't matter if it's a dictator or a terrorist. All that matters is hogging the headlines. Take their Person of the Year award. It's another eternal controversy. We've seen some shockers over the years, but 1938 and 39 take the cake. Hitler and Joseph Stalin. Together, these two men killed nearly 30 million people. But the Time magazine named them Persons of the Year. Stalin got it twice. It tells you a lot about their ideology. It's less about activism and righteousness, it's more about catching eyeballs. You put Baradar on the list and everyone talks about it. It doesn't matter if he's a sanctioned terrorist. Time has amplified a dangerous trend emerging in the West. The definition of a so-called moderate Taliban. That's what the Times bio says. Baradar nonetheless, I'm quoting here, Baradar nonetheless represents a more moderate current within the Taliban, the one that will be thrust into the limelight to win Western support. Just to be clear, moderate is the wrong word. You have ultra-extremists and extremists. There are no moderates in the Taliban. The Time magazine failed to realize this. They have given the Taliban something valuable: legitimacy. Which brings us to Pakistan, giving the Taliban legitimacy. Remember the time when Imran Khan said that Germany and Japan shared borders? Or the time when he called Africa a country? Or that instance when he attributed a quote by Nobel laureate Rabindranath Tagore to the famous Lebanese poet Khalil Gibran? These are all gems from the Pakistani Prime Minister. He has a habit of creating his own history and geography. Now he's also given us a glimpse of his expertise in anthropology. In a recent interview, Prime Minister Khan expressed disdain for American ignorance and then went on to invent a new Pashtun tribe. He said, and I'm quoting, "The Haqqanis are a Pashtun tribe living in Afghanistan. They were mujahideen who were fighting the Soviets, and that they were born in a Pakistani refugee camp." The Haqqanis are a Pashtun tribe since when? Last we checked, they were a terror outfit named after the Darul Uloom Haqqaniya, a Deobandi seminary in Pakistan, not a refugee camp. And the seminary is named after Maulana Samiul Haq. It's an Ivy League college of sorts for jihadists, the seminary. Jalaluddin was one of its first graduates. He added Haqqani to his surname as a tribute to the seminary and formed the Haqqani network. Jalaluddin Haqqani belonged to the Zadran clan of Pashtuns, as do most of the Haqqani network's operatives today. The Haqqanis are not a Pashtun tribe, at least not in this universe. And just so you understand it correctly, the statement came from Imran Khan, who is a Pashtun himself, by the way, from the Niazi tribe. What sort of a hit wicket was this? And just when you thought it couldn't get worse, Imran Khan decided to address accusations about Pakistan's support to the Taliban. He said, and I quote, "The total budget of Pakistan is $50 billion for 220 million people. Do we have the capacity to fund another war when we can barely meet our own expenses?" In other words, what he meant was that Pakistan couldn't have supported the Taliban because it is broke. For a lay Westerner, the statement may seem like the gospel truth. Pakistan is a poor country after all, struggling to make ends meet, only that it indulges in cost-cutting to fund seminaries that nurture terrorists. Look at this 2019 headline from Dawn. When the PTI-led Khyber Pakhtunkhwa government diverted 30 million rupees, meant for high secondary schools, to fund the Darul Uloom Haqqaniya, the same seminary, and this is from their domestic budget. Then they get foreign aid. Since 2002, the United States has given Pakistan more than $33 billion in aid to combat terrorism and insurgency. This is according to data by the US State Department. Where did all of this money go? To terror networks, which Imran Khan thinks are harmless Pashtun tribes. And this is just the state support we're talking about. Ever since the Taliban re-emerged, public donations to these terrorists have soared, and how? Local community mosques in Quetta and Peshawar have been organizing fundraisers for the Taliban. Traders, shopkeepers, clerics, they're all donating as much as $70 every Friday. And Imran Khan says Pakistan doesn't have the capacity to fund the Taliban. This is a bunch of lies. We'll come back to the interview. The Pakistani Prime Minister had another request for world leaders. He said, and listen to this carefully, instead of sitting and thinking that we can control them, the world should incentivize Afghanistan and provide some more time to the Taliban to form a legitimate government and make good on their promises such as women's rights. Give them incentives, he says. Give them time. Just like they gave incentives to Pakistan. Also, Imran Khan speaks as if Pakistan's own record on women's rights is flawless. I'll show you something. This video of 400 Pakistani men groping, assaulting, tearing the clothes of one woman in broad daylight. This happened on the 14th of August, this year, 2021, Pakistan's Independence Day. Imran Khan talks about women's rights in Afghanistan. The Taliban are not interested in women's rights or in forming an inclusive government. The best case scenario is them being less abominable than before. We can't even be sure of that, given the kind of policies they're already implementing to restrict the role of women in almost every field. The best incentive would be to tell them that they'll be cut off from the rest of the world if they don't mend their ways. As for Imran Khan, perhaps he needs to be incentivized to quit politics and to stop talking about subjects that he has no knowledge of. Let's turn to Russia. The president has gone into self-isolation, President Vladimir Putin, after dozens in his inner circle tested positive for the Wuhan virus. The outbreak comes right after Putin met two world leaders and greeted them with a handshake at a time when cases in Russia are soaring. There is no confirmation on whether he's been infected. Some reports say that he's tested negative, but Putin now joins a long list of world leaders who found themselves in a difficult situation after downplaying the severity of the virus in their country.
After trotting the world and infecting millions of people, the Wuhan virus has now breached one of the most carefully guarded areas in the world. The Kremlin. President Putin's inner circle is infected. The 68-year-old leader is said to have been in close contact with them. He has now been forced to cancel all engagements and is currently in self-isolation.
Вы знаете, что, к сожалению,
I had to cancel my visit to Dushanbe at the last moment. I am very sorry, but this is due to the fact that, as you know, cases of coronavirus have been identified in the immediate environment, and this is not one, not two, but several dozen people. And now we have to observe the self-isolation regime for several days.
в течение нескольких дней соблюдать режим самоизоляции.
Владимир Владимирович Путин.
It was unusual for Putin, a man known to showcase strength, a man who hardly ever wore the mask publicly, to give such a statement himself. His staff say the president has tested negative, but he remains in isolation. Interestingly, the outbreak comes right after Putin's meeting with two other presidents. On the 9th of September, he met with President Alexander Lukashenko of Belarus. The two leaders shook hands, and on the 13th of September, he met with President Bashar al-Assad of Syria. Putin greeted him with a firm handshake. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov says that Putin proceeded with the meetings, because no one's health was endangered. It's not clear what kind of COVID protocols were followed in these meetings. This is in stark contrast to the kind of measures taken last year to protect the Russian president from the virus from China. In June 2020, the Kremlin had set up a disinfection tunnel. Anyone visiting Putin's residence had to pass through it. When the president stepped out for inspections, they made him wear a hazmat suit, and his visitors had to quarantine for weeks before meeting him in person. But since being jabbed in April 2021, Putin has attended a lot of public events without a mask and exercising little caution. Now his closest team members have tested positive. The president is self-isolating. He joins a long list of world leaders who have suffered by downplaying the virus. This includes former US President Donald Trump, who called the virus just another flu, only to end up being severely infected himself. Brazil's President Jair Bolsonaro, who refused to take the vaccine, only to end up being hospitalized. And British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who bragged about shaking hands with everybody and caught the virus soon after. The case of Vladimir Putin is yet another reminder on why the world still cannot afford to let its guard down. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
What I'm about to tell you now may sound unreal. The people of Indonesia have won a lawsuit against their own president, Joko Widodo, who's been found guilty of unlawful acts. That's right, the citizens of a country sued their own leader and won. The battle was for clean air. It started 2 years back when at least 32 residents of Jakarta sued the Indonesian government, 3 cabinet ministers, 2 provincial leaders and the governor of Jakarta for failing to combat air pollution in the country's national capital. Jakarta is home to 10.5 million people, constantly ranks among the world's worst cities for air pollution. On several occasions, its AQI scores have outstripped cities like Delhi, Beijing and Dubai. A large percentage of the air pollution comes from cars and motorbikes. In 2019, the people of the Indonesian capital sought measures. They asked the authorities to take action, but the government remained dismissive. This is when this group of 32, which included ordinary citizens, activists, academics and artists, came together and filed a lawsuit. The demands were quite simple. 2 basic things that they wanted from the government. One was to revise regulations on air pollution, and 2, tighten national air quality standards. This was in July 2019. 2 years and numerous hurdles later, the verdict in the case is finally out. On Thursday afternoon, a 3-judge bench at the Central Jakarta District Court sided in favor of the plaintiffs. It declared the president guilty, plus the other 7 government officials. The court said the defendants have committed unlawful acts by failing to act on the requests of the people.
Firstly, the claim of the plaintiffs is partially granted. Secondly, I state that defendants, the President, the Home Affairs Minister and Environment Minister, the governors of Jakarta and West Java, and other senior officials have committed unlawful acts. Thirdly, I sentence the President to establish national air and ambient quality standards to protect humans and the environment.
So what happens next? The ruling obliges the president to establish national air quality standards and the country's health minister to devise strategies to control air pollution, including an evaluation of industrial emissions and making older vehicles undergo tests for pollution. The plaintiffs say that the verdict may not have met all their expectations, but it's still historic, given how it held the leaders accountable for not doing enough.
We really appreciate that the 20 points related to inventory, supervision and others were granted or accepted by the panel of judges, and this is a historic decision for us regarding air quality or air pollution prevention.
Now, whatever be the merits of the case, it illustrates the power of the people in a democracy. When you can elect representatives to lead you, also sue them, if they fail you. Indonesia is not the first country to witness this. It has happened in several democracies before. Thriving, functional democracies. In 2020, a group of young people in the Netherlands sued their government for inaction on climate change. And they won. The country's Supreme Court ordered the government to curb carbon emissions by 25%. Power of the people. In 2018, 25 people in Colombia won a lawsuit against their government for failing to protect the Amazon rainforest. The list is long, the point is short. We all deserve the right to live in a healthy environment, and our leaders have the responsibility to guarantee this. If they fail in their duties, then you have every right to ask questions and seek action through legal means. Now here's a story where the victims cannot speak out. Every year, Denmark's autonomous territory, the Faroe Islands, witnesses a mass killing of dolphins. For several years, activists from around the world have called for an end to this practice. But the hunters have dismissed those demands. They say the culling is part of a tradition. This time around it's different because the locals are outraged. More than 1,400 dolphins have been killed in a record-breaking slaughter. This report tells you more.
The Faroe Islands are famous for their beauty. But the world remembers them for a yearly massacre of dolphins. This year, more than 1,400 dolphins were slaughtered. Footage from the scene showed a long line of dead dolphins. They were placed right next to waters that had turned red with their blood. For the hunters, the culling is a tradition that has been in practice for hundreds of years now. Sunday's hunt was no different for them. Every year, international activist groups condemn the practice. But this time, even locals are shocked by the scale of the killing. They claim this was the largest culling on a single day ever. Some of the locals say this year's hunt was a big mistake, but the hunters who were involved are yet to be punished. Reports say the catch was approved by the authorities and no laws were broken. Advocates of the hunts point to the fact that the practice is regulated. Only hunters with official training certificates are allowed to take part. That justification may not satisfy the angry locals this time. A poll found that half of them want the killings of the dolphins to be stopped. That negative public sentiment could lead to a renewed campaign to end these massacres. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Let me end tonight's show with a strange question. What do you remember about your office? Do you remember your desk or your cabin? The password for your work computer? I ask because many of us have been working from home for a long time. Remote work was the hip word of 2020. Millions of workers stopped going to office. Instead, they work from home, or should I say, from the comfort of their home. It's clear why workers like remote jobs. More time at home, more time with your family, and the best part is comfortable clothes, some will say. Turns out people want to stick with that arrangement. Let me show you what a survey in Britain found. 70% workers do not think they will return to office. 70%. And 79% business leaders think the same, that their workers will remain at home. Is this the end of offices then? Not yet. You see, the staff may like work from home, but do bosses approve? Do they think remote work is less creative? Let's go back to the same survey. 50% of the business leaders said yes, work from home will affect creativity and collaboration. The workers disagree though. Only 38% of them say there will be negative effects. And this could be a point of friction going forward, corporate bosses versus workers. Historically, that never ends well for workers. Every company is choosing its own policy. Take Twitter, for instance. They're offering work from home as a permanent option, but their fellow tech giant Apple is not. They're calling workers back to office. And the debate is not just about performance. Most surveys say work from home does not affect performance. If anything, people seem excited to work. The question is creativity and teamwork. Can a dozen people meeting over a computer collaborate effectively? Would they work better around a table? In some cases, yes. Again, I go back to the survey. 60% people think young workers need face-to-face interaction. They need mentoring. not over the internet, but inside the office. Especially workers from underprivileged communities, they need personal help. If not, their career graph could be affected. At the end of the day, it depends on cost and benefits. Do companies see sense in calling employees back? If yes, then offices are here to stay. But if they're happy with the performance, then no, offices will disappear. There are in fact arguments on both sides. For companies, no rent for buildings, no electricity costs, no transit bills, that's a lot of savings. Same for workers, no special wardrobe, no traveling expenses, and more time at home. So it's still too early to say if offices will disappear completely, but here's what we can say. The myth of office invincibility has been busted. Most work can be done from home. Most meetings can be done online. And if you don't have to fly 100 miles for a simple presentation anymore. Offices may not disappear, but they could certainly become less visible. Some companies are pushing back against this narrative. Microsoft, for one, conducted an internal survey on work from home. They say collaboration and communication was affected. The fact is, the future of offices will depend on companies. Already, many of them are recalling employees. So here's a thought. What if productivity drops in post-pandemic offices? Will they revert to remote working? Possibly. But all of this depends on us beating the virus, and that battle is still ongoing. With that, it's a wrap. We're leaving you with Gravitas Images. Thanks very much for watching.
The 8,837 meeting of the Security Council is called to order. It is protecting the protectors. The agenda is adopted. In accordance with Rule 37 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the representatives of Afghanistan, Armenia, Australia, Austria, Bangladesh, Belgium, Bhutan, Botswana, Brazil, Bulgaria, Cambodia, Canada, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Croatia, Cyprus, Denmark, Djibouti, Ecuador, Fiji, Finland, Georgia, Germany, Greece, Guatemala, Guinea, Hungary, Iceland, Indonesia, Israel, Italy, Japan, Kazakhstan, Luxembourg, Maldives, Mali, Malta, Marshall Islands, Morocco, Namibia, Nepal, the Netherlands, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, Paraguay, the Philippines, Poland, Portugal, Qatar, the Republic of Korea, the Republic of Moldova, Romania, Rwanda, Senegal, Slovakia, Sri Lanka, Sweden, the Syrian Arab Republic, Thailand, Turkey, Ukraine, and the United Arab Emirates, as well as others who have requested to participate in this meeting, if it is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of item 2 of the agenda. Members of the Council have before them document S/2021/730, the text of a draft resolution submitted by Afghanistan, Armenia, Australia, Austria, Bangladesh, Belgium, Bhutan, Botswana, Brazil, Bulgaria, Cambodia, Canada, Chile, China, Colombia, Costa Rica, Croatia, Cyprus, Denmark, Djibouti, Ecuador, Estonia, Fiji, Finland, France, Georgia, Germany, Greece, Guatemala, Guinea, Hungary, Iceland, India, Indonesia, Ireland, Israel, Italy, Japan, Kazakhstan, Kenya, Luxembourg, Maldives, Mali, Malta, Marshall Islands, Mexico, Morocco, Namibia, Nepal, the Netherlands, New Zealand, Niger, Norway, Papua New Guinea, Paraguay, the Philippines, Poland, Portugal, Qatar, the ready to proceed to vote on the draft resolution. I shall put the draft resolution to the vote now. Will those in favor of the draft resolution contained in document S2021/730 please raise their hand. The result of the voting is as follows. The draft resolution received 15 votes in favor. The draft resolution has been adopted unanimously as resolution 2589 of 2021. There are no names inscribed on the list of speakers. The meeting is adjourned.
United Nations peacekeepers are deployed in some of the most challenging and perilous environments in the world, doing what others cannot or will not do. They frequently face threats from armed groups, terrorists, and criminals, many of whom have access to sophisticated weapons and technology. The UN Secretariat's strategy for the digital transformation of UN peacekeeping, with its connections to the Action for Peacekeeping initiatives, addresses how to better integrate the use of technologies to improve the safety and security of peacekeepers, enhance situational awareness and field support, and facilitate substantive mandate implementation. We must protect the protectors, who are working for the cause of peace and security. To this end, UniteAware has been developed and recently piloted in MINUSCA. UniteAware is designed to collect, visualize and analyze vast amounts of complex operational information from many different sources, and present this data to inform short-term crisis response and longer-term decision-making. When deployed, missions will be able to record data on critical incidents and events, follow daily operational activities like patrols, vehicle and air asset movements, access live video and satellite imagery, as well as information from external sources, and quickly retrieve layers of mission logistic and operational data. In volatile environments, detailed knowledge and understanding of past and current events can help deliver early warnings, which make the difference between life and death for peacekeepers and local populations. Peacekeeping is, first and foremost, a partnership. Our collective success depends on every partner playing their role with unwavering commitment. This includes the Security Council, troop and police contributors, regional organizations, host governments, and financial contributors who together allow the more than 100,000 UN peacekeepers deployed around the world, help protect nearly 100 million lives. India has a long and steadfast relationship with UN peacekeeping. Over 250,000 Indian peacekeepers have served in UN missions since 1948. With more than 5,500 troops and police currently deployed worldwide. India fully recognizes that peacekeeping is moving into a new phase, where technology will play the critical role in addressing peacekeeping challenges, and has committed $1.64 million to support a successful rollout of the UniteAware technology platform, as well as technology training courses for uniformed personnel at the UNC4ISR Academy for Peace Operations in Entebbe. Working together in partnership, we can make it happen.
Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, as we formally begin today's open debate on technology and peacekeeping, we wanted to present a short video prepared by the Secretariat on the subject. The video encapsulates the efforts being made under the leadership of the Secretary General to integrate the technological and innovative capacities of member states with the specific needs of the peacekeeping missions. India, as a leading troop contributing country to UN peacekeeping operations, is a proud partner in this endeavor. I thank the Secretary for screening the video. The 8,838 meeting of the Security Council is called to order. The provisional agenda for this meeting is United Nations Peacekeeping Operations, Technology and Peacekeeping. The agenda is adopted. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of item 2 of the agenda. I wish to draw the attention of Council members to document S/2021/681, a letter dated 26 July 2021 from the Permanent Representative of India addressed to the Secretary General, transmitting a concept paper on the item under consideration. The Council has before it the text of a statement by the President on behalf of the Council on the subject of today's meeting. I thank the Council members for the valuable contributions to this statement. In accordance with the understanding reached among Council members, I shall take it that the members of the Security Council agree to the statement, which will be issued as a document of the Security Council under the symbol S/PRST/2021/71. I now wish to warmly welcome the Secretary General, His Excellency Mr. Antonio Guterres, and I give you the floor.
Your Excellency, Mr. President, Excellencies, I thank the Government of India for convening today's open debate on technology and peacekeeping. Over recent decades, conflicts have become more intractable and protracted. Actors have multiplied and diversified, and tools of warfare are increasingly sophisticated. And the growing internationalization of civil wars has made their resolution even more complex. The devastating effects of the climate crisis on the lands and resources of peoples around the world, combined with growing socio-economic vulnerabilities, are converging with and fueling conflicts, causing further suffering. These shifts in conflict are accompanied by a broader societal transformation propelled by new technology. Digital technology in particular represents one of the greatest opportunities, but also one of the greatest challenges of our time. As I stress in my roadmap for digital cooperation, the international community must come together better to govern the digital space for good while addressing its many challenges. And the good is plain to see. Digital technologies play a central role in connecting communities, advancing healthcare and education, and enabling mobilization and change. Digital technologies have allowed parts of the global economy and communities connected to the internet to continue functioning during the COVID-19 pandemic. And in the realm of peacekeeping, tools reliant on digital technologies such as long-range cameras, unmanned aerial vehicles, and ground surveillance radars help peacekeepers protect civilians and themselves. New technologies have great potential, if managed responsibly, to enable safer, harm-free, and more effective operations. But new technologies also pose unfamiliar and profound threats, as seen most clearly in the online proliferation of violent extremist ideologies, increasingly prevalent cyber attacks, and deadly vaccine misinformation. Emerging technologies are also blurring the lines between war and peace. States and non-state actors are carrying out malicious acts that fall below commonly understood thresholds for the use of force, yet may still have devastating impact. Anonymous actors are able to target critical infrastructure such as power stations, hospitals, government facilities, and the IT systems crucial to running our societies. The clandestine use of these technologies risks unintended escalation, including full-blown conflicts. Technology advances are also modifying the ways in which conventional weapons are being used. More accurate long-range rockets and missiles are allowing both states and non-state armed groups to carry out targeted strikes at great distances, including against populated areas. And we're also seeing the increased use of autonomous weapon systems. On this rapidly emerging issue, governments must work together to ensure that sufficient human control and judgment is retained in use of force. In short, new technologies are changing the scale and speed of attack, as well as the character and nature of violence and destruction in war, with an indelible impact on civilian populations. These developments create new and urgent challenges for peace operations, which are experiencing these challenges firsthand. Excellencies, the UN has adapted and innovated throughout its 75 years. The concept of peacekeeping is itself the product of the art of the possible. But UN peacekeeping was conceived in an analog world. It is now essential that it fully embrace the digital world in which we live to improve the UN's agility, anticipation and responsiveness to conflicts, and to be able to address the challenges of today and tomorrow. A shift in peacekeeping culture, as well as a systemic change, are required for this to happen. That is why we have developed a strategy for the digital transformation of UN peacekeeping operations. The strategy seeks to use the opportunities offered by digital technologies to peacekeeping missions to mitigate the risks they pose and promote their responsible use. The strategy takes forward the vision of my second term, a renewed United Nations that is nimble, dynamic and evolving to anticipate and address complex issues. Digital transformation in peacekeeping will contribute to one of the central objectives of Action for Peacekeeping Plus, to further data-driven and technology-enabled peacekeeping. It will be one of the most complex undertakings for UN peacekeeping in the coming years. But the need is critical and the benefits will be profound. Excellencies, the digital transformation strategy for UN peacekeeping focuses on 4 objectives. First, we must drive technology innovation at headquarters and in the field. Second, we must maximize the potential of current and new technologies to augment the capacity of missions to carry out their mandates effectively. This includes transforming information gathering and early warning capabilities to better protect civilians. It is essential that troop and police contributors in frontline roles have access to the most up-to-date technology. Third, peace operations should be able to detect, analyze and address threats against civilians, peacekeepers and humanitarian and political missions in a timely and integrated manner. Fourth, we must ensure the responsible use of digital technologies by peace operations by developing clear principles and undertaking human rights due diligence wherever there is a potential for harm. Excellencies, the digital transformation is already permeating our peacekeeping operations. The Unite Aware platform promises an integrated approach to situational awareness that could be used across civilian, military and police components. MINUSMA is using machine learning to analyze radio data to detect hate speech, serving as an automated early warning system for arrest. The social media monitoring tool used by MONUSCO relies on artificial intelligence to identify perceptions of the mission to improve service. And the Smart Camp initiative will allow for more integrated, efficient and greener peace operations. But to achieve the vision of the digital transformation strategy over the coming 3 years, we need active engagement and support of Member States. We are looking for assistance in capacity building and training, equipment provision and financial